Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are jumping into a really fascinating tension. It's that space between how we actually live our lives and how, well, the law and society define what counts as a valid relationship or even a family. We've gathered a whole range of sources, everything from family law, appellate court cases, right through to psychological research on, infidelity and commitment.
Yeah, and our mission here is pretty straightforward. We want to synthesize all this material because the truth is the social and legal understanding of relationship structures, it's seriously lagging behind what people are actually doing. Whether it's navigating complex multi-parent families, dealing with the fallout of infidelity, or intentionally designing consensually non-monogamous structures, or CNM, as we'll probably call them, the institutions that are supposed to provide security, well, they often just struggle to keep up.
Okay, so let's unpack all of that. We're planning to break this down into maybe three main parts. First, we'll tackle the big one, the legal battles unconventional families face, just trying to get basic recognition. Then we'll zoom in a bit, look at the core mechanics of what makes relationships satisfying or not, including betrayal.
Right.
And finally, we'll look at the sort of design principles, the boundaries needed for uh, building trust and maybe repairing it in today's world. So let's start with the law. Because for families that don't quite fit the traditional model, the courtroom, well, that's often where their stability is most threatened. Our sources point out that polyamorous structures, families with multiple committed adults, they face significant bias. Sometimes they seem almost legally unintelligible to judges trained mainly in that traditional two-parent married framework.
And this is exactly where the rubber meets the road on judicial bias. In custody disputes, which happen in every state, judges use this foundational standard, the best interests of the child, or BIOC. Historically, though, this very standard has been, frankly, used as a tool against gender and sexuality minorities. And unfortunately, many lower courts still show this unsupported bias. They basically conclude that polyamory, just by existing itself, somehow fails the BIOC standard, makes a parent unfit.
That specific fear, the fear of instability, it seems like the critical legal hurdle. Yet it seems to be directly contradicted by the best evidence we actually have.
It absolutely is. We have findings from the Longitudinal Polyamorous Family Study, the LPFS, and this is such a critical piece of research because it's the only longitudinal study of its kind. It spanned 25 years. It tracked kids from early childhood right through to young adulthood. They had cohorts, kids, tweens, teens, young adults.
Yeah, I was really struck by that language shift in the findings. You go from the legal world's fear of damage to the researchers actually documenting abundance. How does the legal system even begin to reconcile that evidence with this ingrained fear?
Well, the research is pretty clear. It shows that children in these polyamorous families often experience considerable benefits. And this is vital because it speaks directly to those BIOC factors judges are supposed to consider.
Okay, benefits like what specifically?
Things like more abundant resources, emotional, physical, financial support. Plus, they benefit from a really wide-reaching network of stable adult caretakers.
Right, more hands on deck, basically.
Exactly. And crucially, the LPFS found no generalized evidence that children experience harm, things like competition for attention or more violence, just because their parents have a CNM identity.
Didn't they also find some positive character development linked to it?
Yes, that was notable. The ethical framework these families often promote. It emphasizes honesty, self-responsibility, and a really deep active care for others. And this isn't just talked about, it's transmitted through open conversation and, importantly, by parents setting an example.
Hmm.
But these positive aspects often get overlooked because of what lawyers sometimes call the trouble with morality factor in BIOC decisions. This factor is just highly susceptible to a judge's personal bias, pro-monogamy, anti-CNM feelings.
But it feels like the tide might be slowly turning, maybe, at least at the higher court level. Our forces mentioned cases, I think, in Georgia and Pennsylvania, where lower court decisions that removed kids just because a parent was polyamorous were overturned.
That's right, thankfully overturned. The appellate courts consistently said, look, there's zero evidence that the CNM structure itself made the parent unfit. You need actual evidence of harm, not just disapproval.
And this connects to a broader legal shift, too, doesn't it? About defining who counts as a parent.
It does. Courts are already expanding the definition of parent way beyond just biology or marriage. If you look at the bigger picture, there was a significant case in New York, Matter of Brook, SPV Elizabeth ACC. It formally recognized the parental responsibilities of a partner who wasn't biologically related and hadn't adopted.
Yeah.
This shows the courts are capable of recognizing multi-parent structures. And Honestly, failing to do so, especially for C&M families, just sets everyone up for awkward, cumbersome interactions later on. Think about dealing with taxes, insurance, healthcare decisions. It gets messy.
It really is kind of amazing that we still need a 25-year study just to suggest that maybe 3 loving, stable adults can be better than one stressed out one. Okay, but let's pivot now from that legal container to what actually happens inside the partnership. What are the key psychological drivers? What makes relationships satisfying or not?
Well, if we start with the data on married couples, two big factors consistently pop up as positive predictors for overall marital satisfaction. One is sexual satisfaction, as you might expect, and the other, separately, is a good family relationship.
Okay, and what does good family relationship mean in this context?
It's really about those core connective pillars. Things like open, transparent communication, mutual respect, a shared commitment to the relationship, and making dedicated quality time for each other, appreciation.
Right, but here's where, for me, it got really interesting because these two factors, sexual satisfaction and family relationship, they don't just operate independently, do they?
No, they don't. And this is the crucial finding for anyone thinking about building a resilient partnership. It's something you really need to grasp. Researchers found what they call an interaction effect. Basically, when the quality of the family relationship, that of emotional core, the communication, the respect, when that is high and really cohesive,
Yeah.
the statistical weight or the importance of sexual satisfaction for overall marital happiness significantly decreases.
Wow, so a strong connection basically acts as a buffer.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
buffers the partnership against the normal ups and downs in the sexual realm. That strong emotional connection provides a deeper layer of security.
That really speaks volumes about prioritizing emotional security. Okay, now let's talk about the flip side infidelity. We often have this default assumption that cheating is purely physical, driven by sexual desire. But the data, well, it really challenges that assumption, doesn't it?
Profoundly. In one major study we looked at, only about half of the people who reported cheating actually reported having vaginal intercourse with their affair partner.
Only half.
Only half. Which confirms that infidelity is often far more about an emotional deficit than it is about just seeking sexual novelty. Researchers identified 8 main motivations for cheating, but the ones that really stood out, the ones most linked to deeper issues, were rooted in emotional needs.
Like what?
Things like anger at the primary partner, feeling neglected, or a fundamental lack of love in the primary relationship.
And those emotional drivers, they actually shaped the affair itself,
Hmm.
made it different from affairs driven by, say, just opportunity.
Absolutely. The motivation behind it mattered profoundly. Affairs that were driven by those deeper emotional deficits, lack of love, anger, they tended to last longer. And participants actually reported them as being more emotionally satisfying. They weren't just looking for sex, they were seeking intimacy, connection. People who felt less emotional connection at home specifically sought out more intimate conversations, more expressions of affection with the affair partner.
So if you're feeling angry, neglected, or unloved, it sounds like you're looking for a kind of emotional life raft, maybe not just a hookup.
That seems to be a good way to put it.
And how did that translate into the aftermath? Like who confessed and why? Did motivations play a role there too?
They did. Confession, which the data indicated was actually more common among women than men in these studies, was often linked to the motivation. If the cheating was driven by anger or neglect, confession sometimes seemed like a form of, well, retribution. Yeah. But interestingly, confession was also frequently linked to the person wanting to form a real, committed relationship with the affair partner. They weren't just ending the affair, they were trying to start something new.
Okay, so moving from that clear physical betrayal, let's touch on the digital world. This creates a whole new layer of ambiguity, doesn't it? Most people agree physical contact is cheating. But online stuff, flirty messages, dating profiles, the consensus just seems to dissolve.
It really does. And that ambiguity creates a lot of room for rationalization. While maybe 70-something% agree physical sexual contact is always cheating, the numbers drop way down for digital acts. For instance, only about 51% said flirtatious messages were always cheating, and only 63% said maintaining an online dating profile was always cheating.
Less than 2/3 for a dating profile. Wow.
Yeah. This lack of a shared definition, these gray areas in the digital world, it makes it easier for people to cross lines because they can tell themselves, oh, it's not real cheating.
That ambiguity is precisely why clear boundaries are so incredibly vital. Especially, I imagine, for couples who intentionally choose to open their relationship, to enter C&M arrangements. If you're deliberately creating that space, you absolutely need a meticulous design document, right? A clear set of rules.
Definitely. And this is where the experiences of people actually practicing CNM for a while provide really valuable insights. They often acknowledge the philosophical arguments against, say, compulsory monogamy,
Hmm.
that it limits freedom or the potential support system. But in practice, they ground their relationships in really rigid structures for security.
Okay, so what specific practical boundaries came up in the sources? What did experienced couples say was essential?
Well, the absolute number one, the overarching philosophy, was non-negotiable. The primary partner and the primary relationship must always come first.
Okay, priority one.
Always. And alongside that, strict total communication expectations, no secrets about the other relationships.
Makes complete sense.
What else? Some common, very specific rules that couples mention. Things like absolutely no mutual friends as outside partners.
Oh, interesting. Why is that, do you think? Protecting the shared social network.
That seems to be the logic, yeah. Keep those worlds separate to avoid complications and divided loyalties. Also, rules about shared space, like no non-primary partners in the marital unless it's specifically agreed upon as a shared interaction.
Right. Keep that space sacred.
Uh-huh. And things like always coming home at night, maintaining that primary home base. And a really crucial emotional rule came up too. You never, ever hook up with someone else while you're angry at your primary partner or because you're angry.
Ah, so the external connection can't be used as a weapon or some kind of escape hatch from dealing with issues in the main relationship.
Precisely. It has to be separate from conflict resolution.
Those principles, strict communication, prioritizing the primary bond, emotional honesty, they sound exactly like the things needed to rebuild trust after infidelity, too. If betrayal does happen, what did the sources say are the core components for actually repairing the relationship?
Well, the repair process fundamentally demands a total restoration of trust. And that can only happen through complete honesty and open communication. No more secrets. It's also really crucial that both partners accept that the relationship they had before the infidelity, it's gone.
That's a hard truth.
It is. The focus has to shift entirely to collaboratively building a new relationship together, one based on this new reality, and the core components of that repair. Well, the partner who cheated needs to take total responsibility for their actions. No excuses. They need to keep every single promise they make going forward. Rebuilding trust is about reliability, and they need to communicate their needs honestly, but also listen to the needs of the hurt partner.
And it's not just about the affair itself, is it?
No, absolutely not. Repair also demands proactively addressing whatever long-standing underlying problems might have existed before the cheating. Things like unresolved financial strain, maybe addiction issues, communication breakdowns, the stuff that might have made the relationship vulnerable in the first place. You have to tackle those head on.
This entire deep dive, it really feels like it's been a study in the absolute necessity of deep communication. Whether you're talking about navigating complex family law or just managing the intimacy in your own connection, the sources just keep pointing back to the same foundational needs: transparency, really clear boundaries, and a deep commitment to emotional security.
I think that's right. And legally, we have to get to a place where we recognize the fundamental right of people to parent and to choose their own relationship styles, whether that's monogamous or CNM, without facing judgment based purely on sort of moral bias. As the law tries to catch up with social reality, any judicial limits on parental rights, they should only be allowed when there's actual evidence of demonstrable harm to a child, not just because a judge disapproves of the relationship structure itself.
And that brings us right back to what, for me, was maybe the most surprising finding about relationship resilience we discussed today. We learned that when the family relationship, that emotional core built on respect, communication, shared life, when that's robust and cohesive and strong, the statistical importance of sexual satisfaction for overall marital happiness, it actually diminishes significantly. So here's something to think about. What does this tell you about the fundamental priorities you should be cultivating in your own partnership? What builds that deepest layer of resilience, ensuring that the emotional scaffolding is always the greatest source of security? Something to consider as you define what relationship success looks like for you.